Hey, and welcome to Hate and Bake, a cooking show where I yell at dead folks. This lets me combine two of my favorite activities, mansplaining and pretending I know how to cook. Today we're making cream puffs and shitting on J. Edgar Hoover. And as a quick disclaimer, please don't watch this trying to learn how to bake. I don't know how to bake. And please don't watch this looking for concrete fact. I am not a professional. This is just a hobby that I enjoy doing. In fact, I invite all fact-checking because I don't want to go around with wrong information in my head. I just ask that you're not a dick about it. Hey there! I am recording. We're gonna put an egg into what is still relatively warm dough. But YOLO. Just like J. Edgar Hoover, who was already dead. Thank Jeebus. Alright, so let's put this egg in there and let's get rolling. Let's talk about this guy. Alright, cool. Great. Got that in there. We wanna kinda Alright, so we just wanna get the stir going. We just want to get the stir going so that the egg doesn't cook at all. Yeah. Get that stir going. Alright, so let's talk about J. Edgar Hoover. If you recognize the name, it's maybe because of like Leonardo DiCaprio, or maybe you're like me and you know just a little bit of history. J. Edgar Hoover is in charge of what eventually became the Federal Bureau of Investigation from 1924 to 1972. He was in charge of the United States Top Intelligence Service, which is the fucking FBI. At the time, it was something else, like the Department of Homeland Intelligences. That's not true. I only know a little bit of history. So, quick shit to stir this until it becomes dry again. And like the key of stirring without being too loud. Okay. Yeah, there it is. Pretty dry. We're gonna have to bust through this if I have 4 more eggs left. And that is how little it takes. So, let's talk for just a second about Hoover. You can see why he's idolized, right? Like, for a large part of this country, he was just the top law dude for 50 years. He ran everything. He created the FBI. He gave the FBI teeth. And as far as, like, if you look at the career of somebody, he was a fairly accomplished career-type individual in the government. If you ever run across somebody who's like, oh, I idolize J. Edgar Hoover, that's a scary dude. I would keep my distance from that guy because, like, almost everybody who's successful in the world, you had to get there by shitting on some people. And Hoover was a cop, so the people that he shit on, like, okay. Let me defend the point at the very least. I'm going to crack this egg over here. Some TV cooking personality definitely instilled in me that you're not supposed to crack eggs on the side of the bowl. So I never do. I think it's Alton Brown. Anyways, so Hoover, in charge of the intelligence agency. He, in the very early on in his career, he orchestrated something that would become to be known as the Red Raids. We're talking like 1920s. These Red Raids, as the name might imply, was rounding up known communists and booting them out of the country. People who were even suspected of being communists. He was just deporting the heck out of anybody who he accused of being a communist, which is a big key. Like, he essentially had full discretion on who would be brought to on communism charges because he was the guy in charge. That happened in the 20s, pissed a lot of people off. And he agreed that he wouldn't get caught doing it again, essentially. He was still going to deport commies because that's what he felt was best for the country. Destroying homes, blah, 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 blah. I'm operating on the assumption that the people hopefully have some sort of understanding that the Red Scare, the prosecution of like communists in the pre-1991 era, was largely like propaganda in order to control and instill this idea of the American way of life. And J. Edgar Hoover was instrumental in enforcing that propaganda. So he's not the guy who's even coming up with the policy. He's like, yeah, I think this is the right way to do things. Everybody should be doing it like that. And anybody who disagrees with me, obviously a communist, because you're going against the best way to be an American. The idea henceforth. So that gets established in the 20s, essentially. The Secretary of the Navy at the time, a little guy named FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, would go on to become our most tenured president. And basically, he and Hoover orchestrated these red raids together with some other old white dudes. This FDR getting emboldened by the position of the president means that J. Edgar Hoover has basically a blank check to do whatever he wants in the secrecy of just like the presidency defending him. He doesn't have to answer to anyone other than FDR. And boy, does he not answer to anyone at all. I'm going to crack another egg. I'm like winded. I wrote the essay outline several days ago, so I'm firing myself back up again. Because fuck J. Edgar Hoover, what a piece of crony. Get fired up with me. Oh, I dropped a whole ass egg in there. It's okay. We got fired up. It's fired up. Don't let it kill the momentum. Let's keep going. So, after the Second World War, Hoover is insistent that there is an immediate threat to the United States, and that threat is already inside the United States. So he's basically now coming down on Americans who are communists in his mind, much harder than the Red Raids. He's also going to do it in secrecy and skipping most court. Like, he could just do whatever he wants because he's the top freaking cop for the federal law enforcement agency. I'm J. Edgar Hoover, man. He is the reason cops or federal agents started being armed. Like, FBI agents weren't armed prior to Hoover. And now he's in charge. He's going to start doing some ideals enforcement after the Second World War in order to make sure everybody's just on the same page about not fucking shit up. And in order to do that ideals enforcement, he gets guns in the pockets of every lawman. And it's like, well, that's a bit of an escalation. And it just keeps going from there. So, let's talk about the legacy of Hoover. I don't know how many eggs I'm on. Is this the third egg? One thing that he does in the post-World War II era is start creating lists of people who he thought went against the American way of life. He considered these people dissidents. The FBI still uses these lists today. Like, the FBI's most wanted list is a list of dissidents to the United States. So there are a series of lists that are maintained for people that need to be watched and monitored by the FBI, and that's something that Hoover started, which law enforcement, a list, I don't think we should be assuming people are doing crime. But, hey, I see the world through lily lenses, blah, 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 blah. I should point out that I am fairly anti-cop, and so just going forward, if you want that like bias filter, law enforcement is unnecessary largely. I'll just put that down there. I'm gonna crack this egg right over here. But what this means in the scope of when Hoover's still in charge is anybody who speaks out against essentially like the JFK style America, that Catholic, white, two kids, a son and a daughter and a wife. If you speak out against that publicly, you're an enemy of the state, because that's the American way. So if you don't want that, you must be a filthy commie. And nobody was a bigger commie than Martin Luther King Jr. Hoover and King, I'm going to say King Jr. Jr. seems belittling. King, can we assume King? King assumed. Forward. All right, so King and Hoover, they really went at it. Hoover's stance, I think officially, was to try to get King to break his peace policies. He really wanted to tick King off to the point of becoming violent, and he would do this by sending blackmail letters to King's home, being like, "Hey, I know you're cheating on your wife. We have evidence of it, and if you want this whole thing to go away, you should kill yourself." That's like, that's literally what the FBI said to Martin Luther King Jr. They called him a beast. Just a list of things. We could go into it, but I don't want to. It kind of gets into like tragedy porn after a while. Modern day law enforcement will tell you that King was only an interest of the FBI because of his communist ties. Lots of people in the social rights movement had communist ties because an aspect of communism is freedom, like the idea of doing what you want and not having the government tell you what to do. Right? I guess. I don't know. Communism? Fuck it. I only know a little bit of history. So modern day law enforcement will tell you that King was only looked at because of his communist ties, when in all reality you can see there's paper trail that the FBI was looking at King originally on the Racial Matters program. So these another list in the FBI of people in the United States who were the FBI was concerned about maybe causing a little scuff because, well, maybe people that weren't white were being treated like shit in the United States, and those people are bad, obviously, because you treat minorities poorly in the United States. That's just the American way. If you disagree, you're a freaking commie, according to Hoover. So, why mention that at all, right? I think it's a good point to show that law enforcement will tell you he's a communist. But, like, you apply a little common sense filter to that. They're only coming after King because of what he's doing. He's creating a movement. They came after everybody at that time who's creating a movement, whether it be for abortion rights or racial equality. They actively went into war against these people because they thought they were disrupting American society. When you want to get into it, aren't they practicing American society? You got that First Amendment, motherfuckers. Let's talk about that Second Amendment. We talked about the guns a little bit. So, in this time, there is a legitimate war happening between, the black Americans and the FBI. If you're fighting for equity, equality, the FBI is against you. And in times, they armed against you. Like, they actively employed guns against you. Fuck. Like, if I get to a point where I talk about stuff like this, where it's like, I can see myself too right now, and I can hear the words coming out of my mouth. And sometimes it's like, whew, this sucks. This guy fought for guns solely so he could go around and shoot people who disagree with him. The FBI won't admit to ever killing anybody, but when the Black Panthers started arming themselves, the FBI took that, like, super seriously. They were excited to have the opportunity to shoot black people without having to deal with repercussions. Hey, it's a couple days later, and I'm going to talk to you real fast about a guy named Fred Hampton, probably the most notable assassination by the FBI at the time under this program. Read about it. Buy a book, read about this program. I'm not qualified to teach you about it. You shouldn't want to learn about it from a YouTube video. You should want to read about that. Under this program, which has since been deemed illegal, the FBI and Chicago police killed Fred Hampton, who was the leader of the Black Panther Party, solely because he was doing a very good job at creating unification in Chicago. He had combined all these communities, some gangs, to use the term from the Wikipedia article, and was creating this multicultural but mainly black voting bloc in Chicago that Hoover saw as a threat to his ideals. Because of that, he sowed distrust in the groups and caused fracturing, slowed it down, but that wasn't enough for him because he eventually carried out an operation that assassinated Fred Hampton. The cops will say that the Black Panthers shot at the police and that's why they returned fire, but there was one shot total fired by the Black Panthers in the raid of their home that morning, and it was into the ceiling as the guy the police murdered shot by reflex. I've got all the eggs in the thing. Dough's looking good. We're ready to keep moving. I'm going to keep moving. I want to leave you with one thing before we get to the next little point where I'm going to stir some more. in 1964, the Civil Rights Act, that the good shit, awesome, made it so all racial discrimination cases are investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So, you have a hate crime happen to you. You're going to be referred to the FBI. The FBI is going to tell you that they're going to do everything they can to bring those people to justice. Nothing happens. How can you... As a white person, that makes a lot of sense to me. The distrust of police in minority communities. Because I see this, and I read it, and I can understand it. And I have a brain on my head. And on it, right here. It just makes a lot of sense as to why people don't trust the police. Because you've got, on one hand, going to war against people who want equality. And in the other hand, saying you're defending the people who want equality. When that mixes up, shit's gonna fall through the cracks. And when the guy in charge is like super racist and super bad and just like enforcing this propaganda and this ideal that is outside the scope of his job as a neutral enforcement agency, I lost the plot, but I think I got it across. I wanted to start with J. Edgar Hoover because he is so involved in how we got to here. I mean, he sculpted modern law enforcement. So when we look at the fact that he's a 5'7" man with like a superiority complex and a hate for anybody that does not agree with his ideas, and we have to like play by his rules because the cops are going to go to school and learn his rules, and they're going to continue to enforce those rules. They're going to play his game still. I'm ranting, and I really hope there's a usable 30 seconds in here, but I doubt it. I'm back, and I just put those things in the oven, and quite honestly, I'm not holding out hope, like even a little bit. What are we doing now? We're whipping cream very far away from the mic. And we're going to try to whip cream into stiff peaks while I sum up my thoughts, if that's even possible. So basically, like, this is kind of loud. I'm just going to be quick about it. The gist is, J. Edgar Hoover worked tirelessly to quote-unquote defend the United States. Pre-World War II, he and FDR got buddy-buddy and very familiar with exporting communists, like deporting them. We exported lots of communists. We deported lots of communists with Hoover, and he kept doing it. And even when public outcry was like, hey, you should not be doing it the way you're doing it, he was like, okay, we won't get caught doing it again. Then he gave everybody in the FBI guns. Step 2, everybody's got guns. Step 3, the same shit, different day. It just has to be a little more secret. Once FDR becomes president, J. Edgar Hoover's got a blank check to enforce the American way of life as he sees it. It all happens basically after that. Like the stuff that Hoover builds his career on, the things that he can hang his hat on, are assassinations of racial leaders, are keeping every single type of minority's voice silent in the country. That's what Hoover's claim to fame is, and he's not somebody that we should be spending our Leonardo DiCaprios on, that's for sure. I'm gonna whip this cream, and just remember that his legacy is still very much part of the FBI, and very much part of how all law enforcement officers are trained today. So, we look at today in this comparison when we see that law enforcement officers are trained using the same ideas, same principles, the same idea of enforcing the American way of life is the bias in which we have all law enforcement, right? It's not hard for me to believe everything that people are saying because we have history here to show us the systems. When they were created with the bias, and those systems are still in place today. J. Edgar Hoover did this. And what really kind of ticks me off is there's all these people saying that the right are Nazis, like Nazi Germany. Hey y'all, the right are Nazis like the right has been since the 19aughts. We don't need to look at Nazi Germany for fascism. Fascism is as American as apple pie. We've been doing it for a very long time, and we've been very good at it. We've hidden it so well to the fact that so much of our country is now actively fighting to continue these fascist policies. And I'm not going to grandstand speech here. You can learn a little more on your own if you're curious. But I really hope these cream puffs turn out well.
And we're back. It's the end of the video. The cream puffs just didn't look good. So I straight up just didn't take a picture or any video of them. Also, like, half of the cooking video got corrupted. So thanks for watching this first one, folks. The next one will probably have just a little more cooking stuff as well. Let me know what you thought of it. Let me know if I was wrong about anything. I think I did a pretty good job researching, but who knows? I just thank you so much for watching this whole thing. And next week we'll do a video game thing. So,
God, it's 2021. Can we get a better way to do recipes?